Hello and welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about all the legendary effects that you can get on your guns in Starfield. We're not going to be going over your armor, your helmets, or your backpack mods. Those will be saved for a different list, and I'm probably just going to group them all together. But legendary effects in Starfield can make your guns substantially stronger, and generally having any of these effects is better than having none of these effects. You can have up to 3 effects on any weapon. I am also going to be providing footage of all of these effects as we go. I think the only one that's technically not in here is the concussion. Some of these weapons do actually have multiple effects on them, so some of them will be featured a couple of times throughout this, but not too many. I was really trying to switch up the weapons quite a bit, and luckily I had a lot of weapons that didn't have these effects on them. I didn't even need to spawn them in, which is cool. So let's begin. Our very first one is anti-personnel. Anti-personnel is a pretty common one that you can get, and this one just gets you 10% more damage towards humans. That's really good. That is just a straight buff to your weapon, and the majority of enemies that you're going to be fighting this are either going to be humans or aliens, depending on how you enjoy playing. Robots are going to be the least likely that you're going to come across, but humans are definitely the most common during mainline quests, as well as the most common during side quests as well. A lot of faction quests, you're generally fighting human enemies, so anti-personnel rounds gets used pretty often. A 10% damage buff is just very nice on any weapon. I'd throw that one right up into A tier. It starts out the list pretty strong. Then going from pretty strong to pretty weak, we have bashing. And bashing makes it so whenever you physically hit an enemy with the butt of your gun, you get to do double damage to it. Bashing is pretty bad anyway. You don't do that much damage with it. Most of the time you're just using it to stagger enemies or to make distance so that you can kind of run away. Building for this is just not as good as going for melee or unarmed, so bashing's going to go right into our D tier. It's probably one of the weakest perks that you can get on any weapon. It's okay on heavy weapons and shotguns and handguns to some extent, but on everything else, not very good. You don't want to be bashing things most of the time. Then we've got Berserker. Berserker's kind of interesting. Berserker makes it so that you deal more damage the less armor that you have. This does go up to an extent, and Berserker is just kind of okay. I would put this one into C tier. Most of the time you don't want to not be having armor on. Having low armor on just makes it so you're going to take more damage from any sort of source. So this one can be a little bit nice if you don't want to go with full armor on your person, but if you are going full armor, then this one's just not that great, and there's not really a good enough reason to pick Berserker over just stacking armor and having more survivability, in my opinion. With the exception of maybe if you want to take off your gear and use this for sniping. Then this one's actually decent. Sniping is okay with Berserker because you don't have to be close and you don't have to be taking damage then. Cornered, on the other hand, is much better. This makes it so the less health you have, the more damage you deal. And this counts for every amount of health. This is in stages of health, so once you do get to the critical health, you're actually doing a good amount of damage, but you don't ever really want to be in critical health because you can die very easily. You can hurt yourself and trigger this, so you can do more damage with snipers and stuff. But most of the time, you're just going to get a little bit of advantage out of this anyway, because most of the time during a fight, you're going to take some level of damage. So I'd put Cornered up into B tier. I think it's pretty decent. It's probably not as good as anti-personnel rounds for all cases, but it can be pretty useful in quite a few cases, and it's a nice addition to have onto your weapon. And then we've got Demoralizing. Demoralizing makes it so you can demoralize targets, which means that they'll flee from you. That's whatever. It's really not that great. Most of the time, if you're shooting an enemy, you'll just keep shooting it until it's dead. Yeah, if it's running away, then it's essentially a free kill a lot of the time, but it doesn't really help all that much, as well as when enemies are at low health, there's a chance they'll flee anyway, or if you've killed other enemies in the area, there's a chance that they'll flee regardless. So having a little bit more chance to flee enemies at the start of a fight doesn't usually matter that much, in my opinion. I haven't really found Demoralizing to be all that great. Then we have Disassembler. Disassembler makes it so you do 20% more damage towards robots. That's pretty good. There's not a whole lot of robots in this game, but there's no real reason to not have this on your gun because it's not a disadvantage towards anything, and if you do come across robots or turrets, you're gonna do a little bit more. Certain missions definitely have robots on them, like the end of the pirate quest. Part of the main story has robot enemies that you're gonna have to be fighting. So Disassembler is pretty good. I'm gonna put it on the low end of A tier because it is just a straight buff, and it's a pretty sizable buff, even though it's not as useful as anti-personnel rounds, in my opinion, just because you're not fighting as many robots. Then we've got Explosive. Explosive makes it so you have a random chance to deal explosive damage with your gun. So that's just extra damage tacked on. This one's really good. This one's going right up into S tier. The only downside is you can potentially blow yourself up with it. Just that comes with all explosives. But you're getting more damage out of this. Explosives have a high chance of knocking down enemies, have a high chance of staggering enemies, have a high chance of disarming them, flushing them out of cover. You can also do splash damage with this, so you don't actually need to be hitting an enemy directly to have good explosive damage on them. This one's just a straight upgrade to your weapon, in my opinion, and it works well on any sort of weapon besides maybe a grenade launcher, but I don't think you can actually get this on grenade launchers. If you can, then you can have a double explosive one, which is kind of cool. Then we have extended magazine, and extended magazine is fantastic. I'd put extended mag up into A tier. It's probably on the very high end of A tier or on S tier. You don't necessarily need it, but it does double your overall mag size, which is great on any weapon. It's really funny when you get this on a double barrel and it holds 4 shots, but it can be really useful on basically anything. It's good on snipers, it's good on full auto weapons, it's good on semi-auto weapons. There's no downside to having a larger magazine on your weapon. Then we have Exterminator, and Exterminator makes so you do 30% more damage towards aliens. This one's really good. This one's also going up into A tier. Exterminator is awesome. Either the second or first most common enemy that you're going to be fighting are either humans or aliens, so having an anti-personnel weapon or an Exterminator weapon or an arsenal of weapons that have both of these effects or multiple other effects can be really good. Exterminator is just a nice bonus to it. Makes it so you can kill aliens a little bit quicker, which can be good for farming XP or just going through missions. And then we got Frenzy. And Frenzy's really not that great. Frenzy makes so you can randomly frenzy an enemy, and that will make it so that they attack other nearby enemies, which sounds kind of good, but it doesn't trigger very often. I've never had a frenzy weapon that's actually triggered like consistently, and having other enemies attack one another, this only lasts for a couple of seconds and then they'll go right back to attacking you. They could also just start attacking something that's not that much of a concern, and if you've already been hitting an enemy, then they're going to be at lower health, so if their allies decide to start shooting at them, they're probably going to kill them pretty quick. So Frenzy, I'd say, is like C tier. It's okay, but it's really not that great. Then we have Furious, and Furious is really, really good. Furious makes it so the more times you hit an enemy, the more damage you deal each time. This does cap, I believe this is at 5 rounds, and each round is a 10% increase. So 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, and then up to the 50% so that you're dealing that much damage, and then you continue just resetting that 50%. That's a huge bonus to basically any weapon besides slow shooting weapons, and even then it's still a bonus to them. Most weapons in this are semi-auto or full auto and can take full advantage of this, so Furious is going to be our second S tier. It's a really good weapon effect to have. Then we have Hitman. Hitman is pretty straightforward and pretty good. This one just makes so you get 15% more damage when aiming. Nothing else. That's an A tier right there. That's really good. Then we have Incinerary. Incinerary makes it so there's a random chance you can light enemies on fire, and fire deals damage over time. Fire also tends to deal percent health damage. I believe that this also counts for that. I know Laser's fire does, so I wouldn't be surprised if this one does either. That's good. Incinerary's nice. You can do more damage with it, so I'm going to put that one up into B tier. It's just a bonus to your weapon, unless you're hitting enemies that are resistant to fire, but that's kind of the effect with all the elemental damages, is that they're really good unless you're hitting something that it's resistant to or that it can just ignore. Then we have Instigating. Instigating makes it so you deal double damage towards full health enemies. This one's S tier. This one's really strong on sniper weapons or on shotguns. Can be really good on handguns. It's not very good on fully auto weapons, because fully auto weapons just don't do that much damage base. Semi-auto weapons do a lot more damage per shot. So having an instigating sniper weapon or having an instigating shotgun is much better. And just dealing double damage makes it really easy to one-tap anything in this game, especially if you combine it with like sneak crits. Even more so if you're going for a full sneak build where you have like concealment, then instigating is usually way overkill at that point, but if you want to have it, you can absolutely have it. Then we've got Lacerating. This makes it so your target can potentially bleed, and bleed deals damage over time. It can stack a little bit with at least triggering multiple bleeds or resetting the bleed, which can be really good. More damage over time is always nice, so this one's going to be B tier. Certain weapons can already have this on it by default too, like the Kodama already has bleed on it, and then the shotguns loaded with flechette rounds will also have bleed on them by default, so that's pretty nice. Med Theft makes it so whenever you kill a human enemy, there's a higher percent chance that they will drop extra healing, med packs specifically. This one is kind of okay. It's pretty good if you can get it early on. I'm going to put it into C tier because it does have some use. I haven't found it to give you that many more med packs overall though. It seems to be like out of one every 10 enemies will drop an extra med pack. By that time, you've probably collected a couple more just off of the enemies. There's med packs laying around pretty often in this game, and you can buy a lot of them. So this does work really well at the start of the game when med packs and credits are kind of tight, but later on, it definitely falls off, and it's not super necessary, but it is a nice bonus to have. Then we've got Poison. This just makes so you can randomly poison enemies, deal damage over time. That's pretty nice. It's like a lot of the elemental effects like Incinerary and Lacerating. I should mention the Lacerating also doesn't work on robots, which is why I'd put it in B tier. It's on the high end of B tier. If you're not fighting that and only aliens and stuff, then it would probably move up to A tier. but I think B tier is fair for it, and I think B tier is also fair for poison. It's good. I would like to have it on my weapon, but if I don't get it, it's not a huge deal. And sometimes the proc chances on these seem kind of low. It just depends on the weapon. Sometimes they trigger super often. I'm not sure what the exact percentage chance of any of these, like poison, incinerator, or lacerating, is to trigger, but it does seem a little bit low. Maybe 20%, maybe 15 or 10%, somewhere around there is what I'm kind of guessing. And then we've got radioactive. Radioactive makes it so you can irradiate enemies, or there's a chance for it to irradiate enemies, and this can also demoralize enemies, so this can make them flee. We already said demoralizing really isn't that great. Dealing a little bit more damage is good, so I'd put this into B tier, like a lot of these just status effect ones. It's good to have, but it's not a necessity, and demoralizing is kind of a little bit of a bonus to this, but I still wouldn't put it like above some of these other ones like lacerating or incinerating. I think those ones are better than radioactive, but radioactive is still a nice addition. Then we've got rapid, which increases your rate of fire by 25%. That's really good. That's pretty good on any sort of weapon. I'm going to put that up into A tier. Whether it's a full auto weapon that already shoots really quick, unless it has a small magazine, rapid is going to be a really good addition. If it's semi-auto, this is just a straight bonus because you can spam fire it even quicker. And with slow rate of fire weapons, it can be really, really nice, like with the Razorback, where it already has a pretty slow rate of fire, so having rapid makes it just feel more consistent. So always going to be a good one, unless it's on something with a small magazine that you can't put a larger mag on. Shattering is basically armor breaking. It makes it so you just deal more damage through enemies' armor. It ignores a certain amount of armor, and this does stack with other armor breaking abilities. So if you want to put armor piercing rounds, or if you want to put depleted uranium rounds on your weapon, this just does more damage then, or it does more consistent damage through armor. So Shattering is like an easy A tier. That one's another one that you always want to see on your weapons. It's good on any weapon regardless of what you're using. Then we've got Space Adept. Space Adept is kind of a weird one. This gets you 30% more damage towards everything so long as you're in space, but minus 15% more damage when you're on a planet. Which, I mean, 30% more damage is pretty good, and I have heard arguments to just put this in your captain's storage and then only use it for raiding ships. That can be pretty useful if you want to play that way, but the majority of people I don't think are going to be playing that way. And the majority of fights in this game, like the vast majority of fights in this game, 95%, I would say, don't take place in space. So this is just a minus 15% damage to your weapon in almost every occasion. When you do get a fight in space, it's pretty decent, but you don't want to be carrying this around as like a primary weapon. I'd put this one into D tier. It's just not really that good. Then we have Staggering. Staggering is exactly what you would think it would be. There's a small percent chance that you can stagger enemies. This stacks on top of your already existing percent chance to stagger enemies. This one can be really good on full auto weapons. It can be really good on shotguns. Other weapons, it's not really that great on, and it's just kind of a nice bonus to have. I'd put it B tier. I think it's perfectly fine. Then we've got Tesla. Tesla makes it so any of your shots have a percent chance of triggering electricity and dealing more damage over time to enemies. This one, just like a lot of these effects, I would just put it up into B tier. It's pretty good. It's pretty nice. It's nothing way crazy, but it is a nice bonus in terms of damage. Then we've got Titanium build. Titanium build makes it so that your weapon is just much lighter. That is a really nice quality of life improvement to any weapon, so I'd put it up into A tier. It's probably on the low end of A tier because you don't really need to have it. It's just a nice thing to have, but making it so all of your weapons are like 1 kilogram or half a kilogram is pretty cool. I had a titanium shiv, I think, that was like 0.17 of a weight or something. It was super lightweight. Not really that great because it was the shiv, but it was kind of funny to have something that lightweight on you. Alright, next one is Concussive. Concussive, like I said, is the only thing that I don't actually have footage for. I didn't find anything with Concussive on it. I have used this a little bit though, and I haven't been a huge fan of it. It basically just makes it so you have a higher percent chance of knocking enemies down, which can be pretty good, but a lot of weapons already have a really high chance of knocking enemies down. Shotguns in particular make it so it's really, really easy to knock enemies down. EM weapons always knock enemies down too. So Concussive is kind of like a win more ability, but not really in a super fun way in my opinion. I'd put it in like C tier. It's okay. It's nice to have on the weapon, but it's not necessary. Then we've got Corrosive. Corrosive deals a random amount of corrosive damage when it first hits an enemy, and then it eats away the enemy's armor so you can do more damage. This is basically like a less consistent armor breaking than something like Shattering. So this one is still good because it is still an elemental effect. It triggers okay enough. I'd put it B tier. I don't think it's as good as Shattering though, even though it has a similar effect to it. It's just Shattering is a lot more consistent. This one is just, it kind of happens, and it's kind of nice when it does happen, but nothing way crazy on it. Then we've got Crippling. Crippling makes it so you deal 30% more damage after you hit a limb. This one's really good with full auto weapons because if you just spray this at somebody, at least at some distance, you're pretty likely to have a bullet go kind of stray and hit somebody in the arm or something, and then you can hit them and you'll just deal extra damage, so it's going to be a net positive there. Semi-auto weapons and more accurate weapons, this one is less useful because it's just easier to hit headshots or to just keep spamming into like the chest. So this one is pretty good on full auto weapons, and for them I would say it's probably like A tier. On semi-auto weapons I'd probably knock it down to like B tier. So I think I'll keep it in A tier just because that's like the best version of it. Then we have elemental, which elemental is kind of like all of these effects, or not necessarily all these effects, but a decent proportion of the elemental effects that you can trigger, and then it's just random as to which one it's going to trigger. And this can be corrosion, radiation, poison, or incinerary. So you can't get bleed and you can't get Tesla out of this, but that's still okay. That's still 4 effects that you can do that are generally going to be a bonus to your weapon, so I'm going to put this into B tier. It is less consistent than just having an incinerary weapon or just having a corrosive weapon because you don't know which one is going to be taking precedent over the other one as to which one you're going to get. So it's going to be less consistent towards a specific type of enemy, but it's still generally going to be a straight bonus to your weapon overall. Then we got handloading. Handloading is kind of interesting because this is a gamble roll as to what you get, where all of your bullets now do a random amount of damage. So you can high-low or low-roll your shots. And this has a 5% chance of dealing 25% bonus damage, a 10% chance of doing 15% bonus damage, a 75% chance of just dealing 5% more damage, or a 10% chance to do negative 50% damage. That last one does kind of hurt this, and it's not really one of my favorites because of that. A lot of the time you are just going to be getting that 5% bonus damage on your weapon, so this is definitely a net positive, especially for fully automatic weapons. It's really good then. For semi-automatic weapons and weapons that shoot slow, I don't like this one at all. So handloader is not the most consistent, but it is decent overall. I'd say it's like C tier for semi-auto weapons, B tier for full auto weapons, so I'm going to put it into the B tier just because it does have a little bit of advantage there. Like if you get a hand-loaded minigun, you're not going to be bothered with it dealing half damage on 10% of your total bullets when it can deal so much more damage for the majority of your bullets. It's generally going to get you more damage then. 1-inch punch makes it so your weapon is converted into a shotgun style weapon, and that is really cool. This actually does a ton of damage, and this one is like an easy S tier for me. 1-inch punch with anything else, which you're going to get because this is a very rare effect. You're going to get multiple of these. If you get like a 1-inch punch with any of the elemental effects, it's pretty crazy. This just makes it so your damage is really, really consistent at close range, less consistent at long range because there is more spread since it is a shotgun style or a shotgun pattern of shot anymore. But for certain weapons that really doesn't matter, and for certain enemies that really doesn't matter either. If it's something pretty accurate, then the 1-inch punch is pretty insane because the spread is also based on your accuracy, or at least it seems that way to me, to where it really doesn't spread out that much. If you just want it on an already good, like close to medium range semi-auto weapon, this is really good because it's just a shotgun, usually with a much larger magazine then. Our next one is Oxygenated, and this one is weird and really not that good. It just makes it so that if you want to hold your breath when you're using a scope, it's more efficient. D tier. This one's terrible. If you have a highly accurate weapon and you're using a scope, you don't need to be holding your breath the majority of the time. Most shots you're taking are not at super long range, and even if they are, you can usually spam fire those weapons fast enough that it doesn't really matter. The hard target is super accurate, the railgun is super accurate, the Vintorez, the old Earth hunting rifle, is super accurate. So like putting Oxygenated on any of them, it's technically a bonus, but it's a very neglectable bonus that I just frankly don't use. And then our very last one is Skipshot, and Skipshot makes it so every 4th shot fires 2 projectiles. That's really good too. Skipshot is also going right up into S tier. That's really good on a semi-auto weapon. It's really good on a full auto weapon, especially one with a large magazine like a minigun. Then that one is pretty insane, or like a mag storm. Really good. Mag shear is also really insane with Skipshot. Even for like semi-auto weapons like on a Beowulf, this is still bonus damage that you're getting, and the Beowulf is fantastic anyway. The only time that this wouldn't be that great is if you just have a small magazine on your weapon and you can't use it as often, but even then, you're still getting bonus damage and bonus damage per second just from firing at an enemy. So Skipshot is always going to be really useful. And this is where I'd put all the legendary effects into Starfield, at least for weapons. We are going to be taking a look at helmets, backpacks, and armor later. Tell me your thoughts on these legendary effects. Where would you place them? Which ones are your favorite? Which ones are your least favorite? Thank you guys so very much for watching this. I hope you guys enjoyed it. You guys have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you next time. Bye-bye!